And this is going to be a fun segment too as well, because I got a couple people who I really hold dear to my heart. I got to meet one of these guys at the Rebels for a Cause event, and it was kind of interesting. I thought I was like one of the lone leftist over there. You know, I'm someone who had, like, I don't want to say communist, but communist roots of sorts, right? Or socialist roots. Even though I consider myself to be a leftist libertarian, I'm all over the board. I'm an independent thinker. But a lot of people that were there were truthers. Some of them tend to lean towards the populist right, but not necessarily set in stone. This guy's an independent thinker too as well. And I'm very happy to finally have him on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex Stranger's here.
Pasta, thank you so much for having me, dude. I'm super excited. I've wanted to do this for a long time, man.
Dude, I'm flattered that you wanted to be on the show, dude. When you told me, like, when am I coming on the show? I was like, dude, I didn't know you wanted to do my show. Why didn't you just tell me earlier? I would have had you on a long time ago.
I think it's one of those things where, like, before I ask people to come on a show, I want to feel like I'm making things and doing something that's relevant to talk about.
Okay.
And so I was kind of just figuring out, like, okay, what am I going to make? What's going to be the political climate? Like, what am I going to do after I get on the show? You know, like, what are the talking points going to be? So that was kind of where I was at, you know?
Well, I'm glad you came on the show. I was trying to identify you properly, and I hate classifying people, right? Because everybody's an independent thinker now, at least the circles we roll in. You know, I got to tell you, was it Matt Baker or Barker? I always get it mixed up.
Matt Baker.
Dude, I met him there, and I know Matt was going to work a little bit for InfoWars. I didn't work for Jimmy Dore. I thought it was awesome. But he's blown my mind away when talking about Israel and Palestine. A lot of people that we knew at that event and a lot of people in the populist right, they still kind of, they're being, I think, somewhat hypocritical when they say free speech should be absolute, but yet they want to say that these people going out in the colleges are, being pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist, and they should be silenced too as well. It's just mind-boggling. But seeing Matt take a stance, regardless of what a lot of people that in his inner circle might think, and for him to think independently on his own, it just blows my mind away. And meeting guys like you and him at that event was so amazing. I mean, breakfast was so much fun, not, man?
Dude, breakfast was great. that entire event was awesome. And me and Matt had did you see me and Matt talk about Israel and Palestine?
No, I did not.
Because me and Matt actually disagree a little bit on a lot of this stuff, right? I'm actually probably like in the minority of like being kind of pro-Israel in this community. You know, like my views and RFKs are actually a little more similar than like a lot of other people's, but that's okay. We could talk about that later or not at all. It doesn't really matter. The point is, though, it is cool to be a part of a community where like all thoughts and all viewpoints are going to be accepted as long as you sound intelligent and like a grown-up when presenting them. And no, I agree. Like, I don't think anybody should be silenced at all. But what you were talking about with these college kids, you got to understand too. And like a lot of these college kids who are, and this is a correlation, we're making generalizations, but a lot of these people that were going out and protesting, these are the same people that like wanted to unperson me for not wanting to get a COVID shot. And a lot of these were the same people who thought like Joe Rogan should be shouldn't be allowed on the internet. And a lot of these people also thought misgendering is violence. Yeah. And so it is actually like,
yeah,
I mean, it is kind of a good thing that they get a taste of their own medicine. So maybe they can wake up and say, you know what? No, like, how about we don't cancel anybody's free speech, right or left? I mean, like, I'm Jewish. Like, you're seeing a whole bunch of I'm seeing a whole bunch of stuff that I thought, stopped really existing after the 1930s. I don't want anybody's speech to get silenced. Like, I think it's just more important to just be adults, have a conversation about why people are saying this, and also understand if whether or not these views that you're seeing online are even real and they're not just bots trying to create an agenda, because you have a group of globalists that go to Davos, that go to the World Economic Forum, all these people, they obviously want to have a new world, use crisis after crisis to create a new world order. Misinformation, quote unquote, like that's their crisis. Hate speech is their crisis. So would it surprise you that like a whole bunch of like Nazi like bots are being created en masse to create to manipulate an agenda? And if God forbid one of these morons shoots up a synagogue, as a result of this, because they don't have a foundation, they don't have a community, they're not like in a position where they feel like they're on like-minded people. Oh man, now we all need IDs to combat the hatred that we see online. So I think like we got to talk about this from I do my best to try to not get emotional about all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, listen, you're absolutely right. A lot of those people out there in that event they're wearing masks not to trip the facial recognition. They're wearing masks because they still believe that COVID is a thing, right? So, I've spoken about that too as well. And maybe it is good that they get a taste of their own, their own medicine when they were trying to silence a lot of us. Especially, I'm a leftist, and I got introduced at Defeat the Mandates 1 and 2. They introduced me as a common sense leftist because I was there. In fact, I talked about the Ivor. I'm not going to say the last part.
Oh yeah, the Ivor. Yeah.
Before before I did it 2 months before Pierre Corey mentioned it, but nobody was watching because most of the people were in that, they weren't that leftist kind of tagline of whatnot. And don't get me wrong, we're going to bring in Diane Sare right now because Diane Sare is here with us too. And I think that Diane Sare will kind of agree with me. I think there's a big difference between being Jewish, Alex, and being a Zionist. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear Diane Sare's opinion as she comes on in, ladies and gentlemen. She is here to have a conversation. This is going to be fascinating. I am so excited because I think this conversation right here, where we have all different points of views and different nuance and context, this is going to really help my show, guys. Thank you so much for coming on, Diane, today. Give us your opinion, too, as well, really briefly about what Alex talked about as far as the Zionism, the anti-Semitism, the silencing of these students that are marching. Because I'll tell you this much. I've been out for some of these protests across the board. I've been to Save the Children protest, border protest. I've been to leftist protest in the streets, the Black Lives Matter protest. I've been to a lot of protests. The majority of these people that go to these protests that are considered pro-Hamas or pro-Palestinian, they're not pro anything. They're anti-genocide. They're anti-ethnic cleansing, and that's what they believe is going on. So give us your quick opinion about this. This is a little throw-in topic since we kind of got started. Diane Sare, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me, Diane?
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, can you? Yeah, sure. Is my internet screwy?
A little bit.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'm
good,
sorry. I don't know why. Okay, good. Okay. Because this is plugged into the Ethernet, so it should be good. But you never know. Well, I do think that, look, at Columbia University, where Hillary Clinton is a professor who gloated over the horrific rape and murder of Gaddafi, they shut down the Jewish Voice for Peace and the Students for Justice in Palestine, two groups that have been calling for a ceasefire, and said that they wanted to stop hate speech. And then they made, so the group had a sit-in in the middle of the square of campus, and a week and a half ago, they were sprayed with skunk spray, and 8 of them, I think, briefly went to the hospital. That's very painful stuff. Or anyway, so how can a campus that has Hillary Clinton as a professor claim that they have any concern for fairness or free speech, or that they're trying to protect people, which is what they said. They were protecting the other students either from anti-Semitism or anti-Islamic something or other, and these were two peaceful groups. I also do think that we can't deny that the International Court of Justice heard the case from South Africa, which I really recommend everybody read, the 84 pages. It's pretty airtight as far as I can say, and it seems that they considered, and I agree, that it's plausible that genocide is being committed, and various Israeli leaders have expressed an intention, like quoting from Amalek, to eliminate every man, woman, child, ox, ass, everything. That sounds like genocide to me. So it's not a coincidence that you have large numbers of children and women being killed. Yeah.
Well, Diane, hold on a second. Are you referring to regular people who live in Israel or the Israeli government? Because like a lot of the Israeli people, there's actually like in Israel, there's widespread protests against
the government.
Okay, the government, because like the Israeli people who just like want to have their own country and worship God and live in peace. A lot of the people who live in Israel, like, there's like a 40% Arab population in Israel. in Israel. So I think that a lot of people are making the mistake of not being able to delineate between the Israeli people who just want to be Jews in peace and the Israeli government who are filled with cartoon villains, where there's a 90% plus disapproval ratio for Netanyahu. And a lot of what Netanyahu's doing, he's being investigated for corruption on multiple fronts. A lot of what he's doing too is because he doesn't want to go to jail. You know, and I think that like even in this community, when you talk about like what's going on and what Israel's doing, a lot of us are missing the point that Jews in Israel are furious with Netanyahu.
The whole.
Go ahead, Diane.
No, I know that, and I think that a lot of people are rightly angry. Can you not hear me again?
No, we can hear you. We can hear you.
There seems to be a delay. This is awful. That October 7th. Okay, that October 7th actually was allowed to occur, and I think this is a situation where you have people on the outside. I mean, you're talking about the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset. You have people who benefit by keeping people at war. And I frankly think it's kind of a psychological behavior modification test to see if we can commit atrocities like have 1.5 million people crammed in an area with no food, no water, no medical care, getting shelled, and then you sit on your hands and you're told there's nothing you can do about it. This is all wrong. If the United States were not run by a senile lunatic, then it would be possible for the United States, I think, in concert with China, Russia, other large nations, to guarantee the security of Israel and urgently a Palestinian state. And I think we have to go back to the 1960s. The last internationally recognized ruling on this is the UN 1967.
Yeah. Can I say something too, really quickly, Alex? Let me say something. I'll let you jump on in. And move a little bit more into the frame if you can, because you're kind of on the edge of it.
Oh, hold up. All right. There you go.
The other way.
And you can see the shirt that I made, which shows my pronouns. There you go.
I know. I'm probably going to get me taken down there. Who cares?
No, it's the most inclusive shirt.
Look, let me just say this much. I disagree with you to a certain extent. I believe that there's a majority of people in Israel, and I have yet to go there, but looking at a lot of the work from Max Blumenthal, Dan Cohen, people who've actually gone there, Norm Finkelstein talking about this, the majority of the Israeli population definitely wants that land. They think they have a right to that land in Gaza. I'm not saying everybody there does, but it's certainly different than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when there was more pro-peace Israelis who didn't necessarily think they had a right to that. And the reason why they're upset at Netanyahu is not because he's bombing Gaza. It's because the majority of them believe that he didn't keep them safe. You know what I'm saying? They do want Netanyahu gone for the corruption reasons. But like I said, the reason why they are critical of Netanyahu is because he believed that he was slipping when Hamas and the other resistance groups that joined together with Hamas attacked Israel. Your thoughts on that?
Okay. Well, it's a lot to unpack. Well, there's a couple other things too, and it's like him consolidating the judiciary has been also a big problem out there. No, I don't have a problem with like 67 borders as it stands. I think that's fair. And ultimately, I love Arabs. I love everybody. Two states where Jews and Arabs, two states or a state where Jews and Arabs are living side by side. Like that's obviously the ultimate ideal. When it comes to Netanyahu, though, you got to understand too that like what happened on October 7th is like 9/11 part 2, right? And, I do agree with you. Like he didn't keep them safe, but that could have also been done deliberately because you have a government in Israel that is run by cartoon villains who could be using this crisis to, create the Ben Gurion pipeline. There's also, Whitney Webb talked about this in detail about how they are like using surveillance technology and experimenting on the Palestinians. They're like trying out all types of AI. And AI is giving like a lot of the Israeli government wrong information and the IDF wrong information so that they're bombing hospitals with innocent kids because the AI told them that it was a terror compound. Like there's a lot of shit like that that's kind of happening to that shit I talked about. But when it came to October 7th, like there were actually multiple warnings from members like, within the Israeli government, within the intelligence community that were saying, hey, man, this is like a bad idea to like have a music festival right next to next to the southern border of Gaza, right? Like, that's openly been talked about. Like, it took 7 hours for them to respond to something like that. And you know what? If they had responded to this more promptly, if they didn't stage a music festival this close to the Palestinian border, right? If the Iron Dome did what it was supposed to do, which it normally does, then there wouldn't even be a response of this type of magnitude, regardless, right? So a lot of you look at what happened with 9/11. 9/11 happens, and all of a sudden now, like, hey, we got a war on terror. We have a war on terror. You get the Patriot Act. You have all this other type of crazy, a whole hodgepodge of awful things just start happening. You look at October 7th. It is possible that Netanyahu did this on purpose and is sacrificing not only the lives of Palestinians, which is obvious, but he's sacrificing Israeli lives too by putting them in this long protracted war, because this could almost be viewed as a last-ditch effort to stay in power. So I do think that what you're saying with what you're saying about Netanyahu not keeping them safe and the safety of the Palestinians, like, that actually does go hand in hand. A government that fails to protect its own citizens not only hurts the safety of its own citizens, but hurts the safety of the people who these citizens feel threatened by.
Diane, do you want to say anything? I mean, my question would be, would you believe as well that the Zionists are part of the globalists?
Look, I want to take.
Go ahead. Diane, you want to come out and come back in real quick?
Yeah. Are you asking me? Hold on. I'm going to try my phone instead, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Jamie, is our connection okay on another end? Alex is coming in fine, right?
Yeah.
You're hearing everything, Alex?
I hear everything great. This is awesome.
All right, here's Diane. Let's see.
Hi. I'm now using my phone, but I think it's much better.
Yeah, you sound way better. This is
Yeah.
So,
anyway, I want to go back to this 9/11 question, because that's a really important inflection point. And as Pasta knows, I don't know if you know, I worked with Lyndon LaRouche for 32 years. He warned in August of 2001. He actually warned in January of 2001. He said, look, Bush doesn't have a strong mandate. You remember the hanging Chads and Bush and Gore, and the whole election really wasn't very clear who had won. He said, if he's appointing Ashcroft as Attorney General, watch out for a Reichstag fire event. He's going to need a crisis to rule by decree. He's weak. Then in August, LaRouche said, watch out for a terror attack on the United States. So the morning of September 11th, I'm at a traffic island in Washington, D.C., handing out a flyer warning of a terror attack on the United States. And cars started coming by saying, did you hear what happened? Did you hear what happened? The World Trade Tower. Now, LaRouche was on the radio that morning at 9 a.m. and he said, don't blame Osama bin Laden. He said Bush better talk to Putin right away. And remember, Putin was the first head of state who called, who said, we're standing down, we're taking down a bunch of these, like, whatever, missiles that are on autopilot that could go off, and tried to help. But then what? The next day, Prince Bandar, Osama bin Laden's relatives are all flown out of the United States. And what LaRouche warned is, he said, don't let CNN, don't be stampeded into flight forward into a whole bunch of wars against countries that couldn't possibly have done this. The idea that some guy with kidney failure sitting in a cave in Afghanistan could coordinate such an unbelievable security breach was ludicrous. Sure, there were Saudi hijackers. We didn't even look at the Saudis. There are other intelligence agencies. And what we never looked at is how the thing could have occurred. And as you probably know, there are whistleblowers like Bill Binney, Kirk Wiebe from the NSA, who had devised a program called Thin Thread, which would have detected this. That was dismantled. I'm very suspicious Robert Mueller came in as head of the FBI 1 week before 9/11. How does that happen? So we never bothered to get to the bottom of it. And like the Kennedy assassination with the Warren Commission cover-up, we never got to the bottom of that either. And in effect, it meant that the people who had carried out the assassination of President Kennedy and covered it up were there running the country. And after 9/11, we got stampeded even more through fear into giving up all kinds of freedoms and believing we had to have nudie searches at the airport. And we've been in perpetual war ever since. So in a sense, you have to really look above and see cui bono, who benefits from stampeding people through terror into massive crimes. And I think when we invaded Iraq, we killed nearly 1 million people. That wasn't discussed much, and it certainly didn't make the world any safer, and it certainly made Iraq a lot worse.
Yeah.
Well, there's also, I mean, just to add to this, there's also an incentive in order to create a state of perpetual war with charge people into totalitarianism. There's also an incentive to arm and finance extremist governments in order to, get the people to consent to wars like that. And you have Netanyahu, who's openly talked about funding Hamas, and you even have this is sort of unrelated, but also related. You have the Palestinian Authority that will they will pay a lot. I forgot the number offhand, but I'm looking this up right now. But I think they spend over $300 million annually paying families of terrorists after somebody's committed a terrorist attack. And this is not, we're not saying that this is to justify what's happening there. But I think that generally speaking, if you're using perpetual war to kind of siphon people into totalitarianism, one of the things that we should be talking about is how to stop these perpetual wars. In order to stop these perpetual wars, you need to look at what's wrong on both sides and make both sides feel like they're comfortable criticizing their own people, because I feel like in order to get peace, people have to be comfortable enough speaking out against the atrocities that their own side is doing, because it's easy to speak out against the opposing team, but until people are speaking out against atrocities done by their own side, and I'm pretty pro-Israel, existing as a sovereign country, and I have no problem criticizing what Israel is doing. I hate the Likud party; they're cartoon villains. They are in many ways agents of the New World Order, but the other side is also perpetuating this and ultimately criticize. When you can acknowledge some of the Israeli atrocities, but also while also acknowledging what the other side is doing. That's how you actually get both sides uniting side by side. And when both sides unite side by side, there is no war. War only occurs when people consent and have blood.
But what if you don't think there's really? I don't think it's really two sides like that. I don't think it's two sides like that.
What do you mean? Why is that, Diane? Explain.
Well, I mean, take what we did to it. You can't say that what they're doing in Gaza is a quote unquote response to October 7th.
I didn't say that.
Doesn't make any sense.
No, I didn't say it's a response to October 7th. I said that, look, I think that if you're going to get a ceasefire, you want the ceasefire to be permanent, right? I mean, that's obvious. In order to get a permanent ceasefire, you can't have extremist governments on either side of the aisle, meaning you can't have a government run by Hamas, but you also need new elections in Israel and new people in Israel, because what's the use of getting rid of Hamas if you're going to get another extremist government that's going to fund Hamas anyway?
Okay, but wait. Let's stop there, because you even talked about this before. We saw the Netanyahu government at one point even talking about funding Hamas.
I literally just said that.
Ron Paul on the floor of Congress talk about who created Hamas. They created the situation that's taking place right now. It's not really fair to say that, they can't have this type of government, especially when they were forced to have this type of government.
Well, that's why I said Israel needs new government too. I just acknowledged that.
Yeah, but see, the question is, look, I would even take a step back. And again, the problem is, what is the United States doing? What was Iraq about? What was Syria about? With Obama, we tried to overthrow the government of Syria. Luckily, Russia intervened and prevented that. The idea is the British Great Game. The idea is a war between the U.S. and Russia, a war between the U.S. and China, a war between the major powers to make sure that the imperial powers or the financial powers or the people who think that they're above nation states can run everything. So if you can straighten out the relationship between the major powers, namely the US, Russia, China, India is a little different, but if you can straighten that out, then these other things can be solved in that context. But if the United States has this very bizarre position, which we've had since the Berlin Wall came down, which is that we are the global hegemon, and no one is allowed to get out of poverty because it's a threat to whatever we think we are, it's a complete misunderstanding of what the United States is.
No,
And
I
I
agree
think
with
this
you.
is,
Diane, I agree with you.
What?
Like, I just want to say, like, I fully agree with what you're saying. Like, what you're saying is super spot on. You know, and the more you have these wars, the more you have these foreign conflicts, the more you egg them on. And the more you don't, like, the more you write blank checks to foreign countries. Like, I don't think we should be giving money to Ukraine, and I don't think we should be giving money to Israel also. Like, the more you fund this stuff, the more you threaten the sovereignty and the well-being of people who live here, because these types of wars, especially if they escalate into a giant catastrophe, which we're on the way to do, right? And it's attuned to what you're talking about. Like, the more the farther down you go when it comes to escalating these conflicts, like, well, that's how you create economic resets. And, you know, when we're in a situation where our money, our currency, it's backed by literally nothing other than like the force of our military. And these types of military conflicts, you know, they have really two scenarios. Like, on the one scenario, we just continue brutalizing people and sanctioning genocides all over the world. And on the other scenario, we show that our military is a paper tiger, and then, you know, dollar dominance and dollar hegemony dies out. You get hyperinflation. You know, hyperinflation always leads to totalitarianism. And then the rights and freedoms that come with living in America, they go out the freaking window. So I agree. And I'm just kind of expanding on it a little bit.
But it's a little different because, look, how was it that the United States, from the American Revolution, 1776, to the Centennial Exposition, 1876, with a so-called, and I would say misnamed, Civil War, the War of the Rebellion, the British ran that thing. They brought slavery back into South Carolina. That's a whole other story. But at any rate, we lost 600,000 people in that war. And nonetheless, by the time of the Centennial Exposition, the United States had the highest standard of living in the world, and we were producing more than the entire planet combined. And there was a certain optimism, a certain faith in the goodness of people, that the point of your government was to direct credit into those things that gave human beings each more power over nature. So you think about the Transcontinental Railroad. I mean, who but Abraham Lincoln would think of building the thing in the middle of the Civil War? That was unbelievable. But it massively increased the productivity of our nation. And what happened after that exposition is that Mendeleev was here, the Emperor of Brazil. A lot of people from all over the world came over and they saw this. And then they went and they wanted to build the Berlin to Baghdad Railroad. That was blown up by the British. You had many nations beginning to get a glimmer of American system economy with their own cultural characteristics, the Meiji Restoration in Japan, different things like that. And what happened? The British came in and just sabotaged it, destroyed it, got everybody fighting everybody. We ended up in World War I, where, in my opinion, we were on the wrong side. We shouldn't even have been in it.
We shouldn't have been there, but we also had the creation of this thing called the Federal Reserve a few years prior
Correct.
to that. And then we staged the false flag in Germany. What was it? The Lusitania, where we deliberately put the Lusitania in like, I forgot, well, by the Atlantic Ocean, I'm assuming, right by where Germany is. The Germans shot it down. We put American lives in danger because the bankers wanted Wilson to get us into the war, because now we have a central bank. The central bank gets to print up money arbitrarily that we owe with interest. And so, yeah, there became a huge financial incentive to get us involved in a lot of these wars. And we were an isolationist nation pretty much up until, well, maybe
we weren't. No, we weren't isolationists. See, the point of the Monroe Doctrine, and it was horribly misunderstood and was not imperialism, was that we didn't want the British Empire to move in pushing their opium, slavery, and all their other free trade garbage. So we wanted to help nations develop. We wanted to encourage trade, and raised the standard across the, across the bar. And Woodrow Wilson, not, I think, coincidentally, as you probably know, revived the Ku Klux Klan from the White House as well. He showed The Birth of a Nation. He gave it a screening.
I did not know that, but that's
yeah.
wild. That is insane.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Okay.